Which is better, this or this? Correct. It is this. Just look at this beauty. They don't make cards like this anymore. MSI Twin Frozer. Look at that. How useless was that? Mini HDMI. I never understood that. And look at that PCB. Beautiful. So, we are going to be taking a look at this card today. Now, this is not a modern card by any standard. In fact, this card is 12, 13 plus years old at this point. So, why am I taking a look at it then, if it's so irrelevant at this point in time? Well, I want to kind of see if it still, just look at that glow, baby. I want to see if it still has any relevance today, if it is worth picking up for like $10 to $20, and just see if there is still somewhat of a use case for this in 2024. Do I think there will be? Not necessarily. It is a very old card, and while I expect it to reach maybe 20 to 30 FPS at low settings in some games, I don't think it's going to perform well per se. So with that said, I think let's get right into it. Let's see how it does, and let's benchmark a really old card. Let's do it. Okay, getting into the Hitman benchmark, and right off the bat we are in the 40s for average FPS. Now that is surprising. The game is running at low 720p, that's what all the games are going to run at, but yeah, it's pretty smooth. It's at 50 FPS average. I didn't expect this. I mean, this card is so old at this point. It's not expensive at all. And look, I know you're not going to be playing Warzone on this, but if you're someone that just wants to play older games or newer games at the lowest possible settings, there might be a case for this. Now, I'm not saying it's a strong case, but there might be a subset of people that still can make use of something like this. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to play Hitman on a small screen at 720p in low settings, there you go. It's very playable. And weirdly, it doesn't look that bad, and I think that's just because of the small screen, but it honestly does not look that bad. I wouldn't mind playing like this. It's sort of equivalent to PlayStation 4 graphics. So that's very impressive for the age of this and for the price. Because you could build, for $100, you could build a PC with this in. Not even, maybe $50, honestly. So, yeah. Very impressed, to be honest. Didn't expect this. Now, you will need to pair this with a decent CPU to get this kind of performance. This is a 2500K, which is not the newest thing, but it is still decent. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's do it. Okay, so I thought about it, and a built-in benchmark isn't always the best way to test performance for a game. Obviously, it's not a lie, because it does represent the performance, but I feel like there are more natural ways to test performance. Now, I don't have any sort of performance metrics installed on this, but we're just going to go by feel today. And let's see how this does in terms of playing the game. Now, right off the bat, it feels sluggish, but I do think that's to be expected. But how does it look? Honestly, not that bad. The colors are good. Now, that might be down to the screen. And look at the guy walking, for instance. It's not like it's unplayable. It's not like it's like so slow that you can't even... I'm not sure why my shot didn't... Okay. What the... Oh, there we go. Anyway, it's not like... Oh, I wasn't meant to kill that guy. Anyway, it's not so slow that you can't play it, because this is definitely playable. Now, it's not smooth per se, and you can hear the PC chugging along, but it's definitely playable. And I mean, look at this, it doesn't even look bad. So am I impressed by this? Yes, I am, for the price that this costs. Yeah, would I play like this? Not necessarily. but you know, it's okay. I guess that's not gonna explode. There we go. I'm not even sure if I was meant to kill that guy. Someone's shooting at me. Seemed like it. Anyway, so yeah, Hitman is definitely playable, and it is a relatively modern game. I think it came out like 6 or 7 years ago. So, can you play games on a PC with a graphics card from 13 years ago? Kinda. Let's move on to the next benchmark. Let's do it. Okay, getting into the first benchmark here, and this is Far Cry New Dawn running at 720p low settings. Now, this is smoother than what I thought it would be, to be honest. That frame time graph there is looking quite stable, not too bad. It is dipping and, you know, shooting up, but it's nothing too much. And it is still at around 30 FPS. It's 30 average right now. And on a small screen like this, it doesn't look half bad, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's a good result so far, and I think it's semi-playable. It's not exactly smooth in terms of what it might feel like, but you know, it's not a stuttery mess either. So it's still at 30 FPS average, 29. And it's doing really well, I think, and like I said, it looks quite good as well. So honestly not a bad result. I know it's low settings, but it's not too bad for a card with only 1 gigs of VRAM, and a card that is 13 years old at this point. So we do have 28 average FPS. That might shoot to 30 in some benchmarks, in terms of if we did this benchmark again. It's running at 720p low, so not exactly the most desirable result, but for a card that will cost you about $10, it's actually not that bad. Okay, with that said, let's move on to the next one. Okay, let's test out Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And right off the bat, we are having some graphical issues, and that is probably because this game runs in DirectX 12 and this card doesn't support DirectX 12 out of the box. Now do keep in mind that this game is 10 years more or less younger than this card, and if you think about that, then 34 to 40 FPS does not seem that bad. I do think that this game is maybe a little bit too much for the card to handle, but honestly the card is not doing that bad. We are at around 30 FPS in that scene, and while it is obviously a artifacting mess, it is running decently. We are now at around 40, which, you know, is really not even that bad. You know, I'm not saying you need to go out and get a card like this. Obviously this is a retro throwback test, you know, but I am testing some more modern games. But it's just, I'm impressed by the longevity of the card, because 20 years ago, what were the cards we had then? I guess maybe Nvidia's earlier cards, with like 128 gigs of 28 megs of RAM. If you compare that to this, then I guess it would be similar to comparing this to a card with 12 gigs of RAM, VRAM I mean. But still, I just feel like the gap in generational power isn't as big with this card as it was back then, because this card is handling games that came out 10 years after it, and there is something to be said for that. Now again, I'm not saying you need to go out and play like this, obviously, but there are a small subsection of people that would play like this, people that can't afford anything else, and you know, there's a lot of people in the world, a lot of people with limited funds. So I think this sort of thing is more common than we necessarily realize. But apart from that, I think you will be limited in what you can play if you don't want your games to look like a artifacting mess. But just in terms of raw performance, 30 FPS on a card that is like 13, 14 years old, not bad at all, to be honest. Now this is running at 720p low, but again, it doesn't even look that bad. Okay, with that said, let me stop rambling. Let's get into the last test. Let's do it. Okay, so for the last test here we have Graven. This is an indie game that came out a few years ago, and now this game is sort of like a throwback. What is happening? What the? I don't know what just happened. I think the physics of the fish got stuck under me. Anyway, this is like a throwback style game that is meant to look old, so to say. So it's not exactly impressive to be running Graven in this day and age, but we are running it on a 14-year-old card. You love how I just keep making the age of the card older and older as the video goes on. Oh, that was kind of stupid. But, you know, again, I don't actually have a FPS counter, which is a little bit silly for a benchmark test, but for something like this, I feel like you should go on how it feels. And this feels like 45 FPS, if I can put it that way, but it feels smooth, like, it feels playable. And, you know, if your budget is extremely limited, you want to buy your kid a PC, or you want to, I don't know, you need a cheap PC, basically. You know, you can get 10 to 15-year-old hardware for cheap. You can get a beast from 10 years ago now for $100. So not necessarily this graphics card, but if you bought like a 580 with 2 gigs of RAM, VRAM, and you have like 16 gigs of DDR3 RAM, and you have a 3770K, for instance, that's quite a good PC. Like, you'll still be able to play even like GTA 5. Now, if you can get that up to like maybe like a sixth gen NVIDIA card, like let's say like a 680 4 gig, then you know you've got a PC that can play things. You've got a PC that can handle things, and you'll be paying like $200 for it. So obviously there are tiers. Like, this is pretty much the lowest tier of graphics card that can still run games now, and it's not going to run everything. It'll run games like these, but there are tiers, there are options for people with limited funds, so I think it's interesting to check those out. And I mean, this is a fun gaming experience. It even looks quite good. So yeah, let me not blabber on too much, but with that said, let's do the outro. Let's do it. Okay, so let's talk about this little PC. Well, it's not little, but let's talk about this PC. I mean, specifically the graphics card, but you know, this graphics card goes with components that are this old, so it makes sense to put it in this PC and test it that way. And in terms of performance, like I said in the previous section, you're not going to be playing the newest and best games. I mean, that's just obvious. You're not going to be playing you know, Call of Duty or Battlefield or what are some new games now? Well, you're probably not even going to be playing Valorant, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, you're not going to be playing the best new games, you know, AAA games and stuff like that. But there are indie games that released like 2 years ago that you can still play, and they still look quite nice and they run well. And you know, there are strategy games like these, there are two-dimensional games. Like, I never test platformers because there's no use really, but if you're someone that wants to just get into like indie games specifically, you know, getting a PC like this might not be too bad of an idea. The screen was $15. The rest of this PC was about $100. It has an SSD in it. It has a good power supply. It has a good CPU. It has this graphics card. I'm not going to say that's good, but you know, for this use case, and you know, for like $100 all in all, you can buy a setup like this, and you'll be able to play a limited selection of games, but you'll be able to play games. And so yeah, so what I'm saying is there are use cases for parts like these. And even though it might be a little bit silly to test this in 2024, I do think there are people that are still interested in seeing this, and people that would be interested in using this. even if it is just for nostalgia's sake. To a lot of people that are sort of like adults now, this would have been the cards that they grew up with, the cards that they used when they were kids. Sort of like, I mean, I had a card like this. I remember getting this card when I was in grade 9, 2009. So back then, what games were out then? Crisis 1. I remember getting a card like this when I was in grade 9 in 2009. And the games I played on this were like Modern Warfare 2 back in the day, the old one. Crisis 2, Command and Conquer, Supreme Commander. You know, those golden oldie games that, you know, those are still available. You can still play them. It's not like they disappeared. You might have to get them secondhand, but you can still play those. And a lot of those games were better than the games being made now anyway, so it's maybe not a bad idea. But the point is, there are use cases for this, and if you're someone that wants to go out and get something like this, there are still places you can get them. So yeah, to summarize, don't get a PC like this if you want to play modern games, but if you want to play specific indie games, older games, and platformers, then this will do just fine. So with that said, that's going to be about it for the video. I hope you enjoyed the content. Yeah, I'll be doing some more higher grade stuff in the coming weeks, looking at some more modern graphics cards and stuff like that. So look out for that, and I hope to see you. Well, I guess you'll see me, but I hope that we just watch the video. Thanks for watching. Cheers.